Welcome to the GMS Magazine Podcast. This is a podcast all about board games, role-playing games, and the people who make them. Sometimes also the people who play them. I am one of your co-hosts. I am Paco Garcia.
And this is Chris from DSX Machina.
Hello, Chris.
How are we doing?
We're doing fine. And I always find it very weird that we start the podcast and we ask ourselves this question when we have been chatting for half an hour before.
Most of the time, there was just in this situation, most of the time when we get into a conversation, we go, well, let's hold it, let's put it on the air because it's a good conversation. In this situation, it was a conversation in which we both decided that at this point in time, we don't want to talk about it.
No.
Because despite how juicy and how tasty and how tempting, oh my God, it was. We could go expose. We could there's so much bridge burning we could do. But
yes, but no, we're not.
We will move on to the subjects at hand.
Yeah,
I mentioned that unfortunately I have not played a game recently, only because of prepping for a wine event, and we had a very big trade show. That being said, I really want to get Apocrypha back to the table thanks to our interview with Mike Selinker.
Well, I need to. I have it here in my home, so I need to bring it back. But I do need to reread the rules. So I think that's going to be a Christmas one, where I can sit down and just play it.
Has that interview gone up? I actually haven't checked that.
Yeah. Oh no, it went out last Friday. Definitely, the podcast.
So Lords of Vegas, I guess, is out. But unfortunately, I think a good part of that conversation is going to be, how naive we were talking about politics.
Yes, which is the first thing that I want to bring up in today's episode. We're going to talk human beings because I do have a review. So we're going to have three things to talk about. We're going to talk about how we feel the USA elections and the newly elected fascist system is going to affect the world of games. Secondly, we're going to talk about the pay what you want and AI, and I do have a review because I have played the game. I played the game that we've actually enjoyed. So let's talk about politics. Firstly, friends from the United States, genuinely, I am so sorry. I am not going to venture say how bad things are going to get. But I reckon that things are going to get pretty bad over the next 4 years for an awful lot of people. I'm sorry that you're going to have to put up with whatever it is. If you are one of the people who think that you're not going to put up with anything because what's coming is the right thing, please stop listening now. Thank you. We don't want you as part of our audience because any Trump supporter is not welcome here. Thank you very much indeed. I don't care if that burns bridges or audience or anything at all.
At this point, who in the world? I will say this very, very quickly. Like I said, I think I am part of a large group of people that went through a mental health crisis last week, an existential, extending to the whole of humanity. Feeling whether or not we have the confidence. When someone talks about the situation and how bad the situation is, and I'll summarize it I got two things to say, and I'll try to make them as quickly as possible. The first one is that how do I put this? There's 245 million Americans that can vote. That's the voting age population. Of those, 145 turned up to actually vote. 73 million voted for Trump, 69 million for Harris. So I don't have a problem with the 69 million people who voted for Harris. I have an issue with the remaining 176 million that either fell into the cult or opted out. After everything was levied, all the threats of fascism, the lies, everything, 176 million people made no attempt to save their country. And as a result, I feel that at this point, it's showing that the United States as an entity is on borrowed time. That's 52% of the entire population of the country.
I agree with you because And we have had elections in Spain where we've had the same level of absenteeism.
Yeah.
And the message that sends is that people don't believe in the system.
Yeah.
They don't think the system is fit for purpose, and that's why they don't bother participating. Now, in the case of the United States, it's even worse because they have a bipartisan system. Absolutely no other party has
Yeah. They're
anywhere.
bipartisan and they have the electoral college, which makes your vote worthless in 70% of the country.
Correct. Now, in other countries like Spain, for instance, or the United Kingdom, the United Kingdom is worse because you have only three, perhaps four parties. In Spain, we have an awful lot of them, and it is possible for those parties to sway an election by making coalitions. We're very used to a government being composed of several smaller parties, or one big party with smaller parties who create a big majority. So that means that parties have to be negotiating all the time, not just following what they want to do, but following what a team of people who may not be exactly aligning in politics want to do. Whereas in the United States, that's just not possible. So that makes it even worse. And I agree with you. I think they're on borrowed time because we're going to see an awful lot of things. Now, how do I think this is going to affect the gaming industry? I'm not going to go into many others, only very briefly. But one of the first things that are going to happen is that some taxes, some percentages are going to be added to imports. And we all know that the United States, like most of the world, depends very, very badly on imports, especially from China. And the gaming industry prints 90% of all the games in China. May not be 90%, but it is a huge, huge percentage. Definitely all the big fish print in China. Most of the people who need to print more than 1,000 copies print in China. Unless you're based in Europe, you print in China. If 20% is added, which is the threat that's been going on, or even 100% to some of the goods, the price is going to go up. Simple as that. There's no way in hell that companies can take the hit of a 20% increase in import fees. Impossible. So prices are going to go up. What's been promised of prices of food and gas coming down is not going to happen because the United States depends on foreign imports to get their fuel. And it doesn't matter how good a deal they have with Kuwait or, or wherever. That's not going to go down. That's just not going to go down. And neither is the food. So I reckon that an awful lot of jobs are going to be lost. An awful lot of discontent is going to be had. And the prices are going to go up. So I think a lot of smaller companies are going to go under. An awful lot of people are going to turn to Kickstarter to try to make it, and we're going to see an increase on how much money people ask to have things done, because otherwise they won't be able to afford it. We're going to start seeing how people are going to start charging for postage within the US. One of the things that we've always found very annoying is that people do a Kickstarter and the price of shipping within the United States is included in the pledge, but not the price to ship to Europe or anywhere else. We have to pay extra for that, but not Americans. That's going to go. That's going to disappear. Because again, that is a hit that people are not going to be able to take. So I reckon that will be pretty disastrous. We will see a lot fewer games being produced. But also, I can see a lot of companies with a foothold in Europe bringing more and more operations to the UK or to Germany where they can handle their taxes a lot more efficiently without getting ahead on production. At the end of the day, for Hasbro, I don't think it matters if they are based in the UK or in Ireland or if they are based in New York City. Tax wise, will be better if they are based in Europe. As long as they keep a presence in the US to still be an American company, then they will. But they can do like Google. Google is based in Ireland because of the tax breaks. Why should they not do the same? Their market is still going to be the United States, but they could benefit from that. I'm saying Hasbro, I'm saying Paizo, I'm saying Asmodee, Steve Jackson Games. They can do all those things, and I think we will see a fair number of people doing that. We will see a fair number of people printing their games in Europe just to serve Europe. Hopefully, that will also mean that we are going to see an awful lot of American companies looking at the European markets and promoting the European markets, because that could be a market that, if they exploit a little bit more, could compensate a little bit for the losses that they're going to see in the US.
So the situation on my side of the pond is going to be a little different. For one thing, Canada has always had Canada is very much probably of all the countries. I think Canada is the one that's going to be the most affected by the American political system. We share the largest border. In case you're wondering, even though OPEC seems to want to be able to set the price on gasoline, 75% of U.S.'s gasoline comes from Canada.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 75. Yeah. Canada makes way more oil than they could possibly ever use. And 75%. In fact, we export so much oil to the United States, we have to import oil from overseas, which is part of the an agreement that a lot of Canadians that know about it am appalled with, but that very few Canadians know. This includes lumber deals, gas pipeline. There's been pushes and pushes to get these gas pipelines put in. There was a massive pipeline that was supposed to run from Canada all the way to the southern United States that was axed. It was a very big controversial aspect. We sell electricity. I live in British Columbia. British Columbia has 3 linked power dams. One of them being one of the largest in the world, which is the Wack Bennett Dam. It's not a whack as in hitting someone. It's WAC. And it produces so much electricity that we provide electricity to all the way down to California. So the funny thing is that theoretically, Canada could and should be able to make demands on how these agreements are made, but because Canadian politicians are in so many ways completely impotent in dealing with America, we get shafted. In fact, it's been decided we can make way more money exporting our lumber and our fuel and all this stuff over to other countries, and we are just not allowed to because of our agreements with the United States, and knowing the fact that we can't even negotiate better rates because our politicians are so impotent. And now the issue is, of course, is the fact that in Canada, it's not that much better. The Progressives, we had an election in British Columbia, and we are in the same situation, 4 or 5 parties, and we have a better electoral system where past the vote, your votes actually matter. But to give you an idea what's been happening, a lot of these parties have been merging. So now suddenly in certain provinces, you only have 2 parties. In BC, we used to have 4. Now we basically have 3. And one is such a small minority, it comes down to 2. And so it fell down to 2 parties. The Liberals merged with the Conservatives and formed basically a far right party. And the NDP, which is the New Democratic Party, very, very left, far, far left. And they won. And give you an idea how close this election was. In some areas, the election was won by 22 votes.
That's incredible.
I was reading up that their election it got that bad. And the only reason why we don't fall into being heavy conservative is the fact that a large majority of the population of the province lives in one single, very left city, which is Vancouver. Vancouver is very left, and it's 90% of the population of the entire province lives in that city. And so no matter how much the small cities like I'm in, my town is very conservative. No matter how many times people bitch and complain, Vancouver determines who runs the province. But our Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau, through propaganda and a lot of hacking interference and so forth, has turned into a very unpopular president. So kind of like Biden, the fact that Biden did a lot of great things, but everyone hates him, but they don't know why. They just have these amorphous reasons which are fed through propaganda. So there's been talk about Pierre stepping down as the leader of the party, which you can do. The rules are different. This is not a president of the United States kind of situation. We have the person who runs the party gets to be prime minister, but that can change hands while that person's in power. You don't vote for the person, you vote for the party. So there's a talk about him moving aside because the conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, is so unpopular, but still could get into office. And you're talking about coalitions. There was a law for the longest time. There was a very profitable coalition between the NDP and the Liberals because they had a lot of common ground. But the Liberals have, in the last little bit, been shifting more and more center right. So the NDP said, well, if you're not going to align with us, we're not going to support you. So now the Liberal Party is basically running the show by themselves. So we have these huge problems. But I also notice that the further right America swings, Canada has a tendency of pushing back left. In fact, one of the reasons why I think the Liberals stayed in power throughout the entirety of Trump's power reign was because of that. When Trump went into office, there was a push to try to mimic his type of government in the Conservative Party. And there were several rich people who wanted to try to emulate Trump's America, and Canadians rejected it so wholeheartedly he basically had to back out of the race within a few weeks because he was so wholly unpopular. So I'm hoping that there's a possibility, however unlikely, that the rise of this second Trump term, or sorry, the last Trump term that could go on for a lot longer than 4 years, is going to push Canada to fight back in such a way that they keep the Liberals in power. I'm also really hoping that my NDP leader, who's a great guy and a great man, steps aside for somebody that's a bit more charismatic and more available to the majority. And that's a subtle way of saying that there's too many racists in Canada to vote for somebody who's not white. And I hate to say that, but I love the man dearly. I vote for him every single year, but I know that he's never going to be prime minister. I'm rooting for a guy named Wab Kinew, which is the greatest name. I want him to be prime minister because if he won, he would be the first Aboriginal prime minister of Canada. And I think it's about damn time we had that in office. So that's why it's not like I really don't like Jagmeet Singh. I just really want Wab Kinew to be prime minister. Now, going into your other point, talking about the issues going on with tariffs, which is the charges. When my first product hit American shores, I had no tariffs. Second time I had a 2,000 or 3,000, and this time I had about 4,000. This was also a larger order, it was about $50,000. So a lot of people don't realize there are currently no publishers in the U.S. that can print books at the cost compared to China. So if a book originally has a print cost of say $5, and say it costs another $5 to ship it, I can usually sell it with an MSRP for $70. Now, why is that? Because the retailer takes a reduction. I'll make $30. They'll make $30. Now, they slap a tariff. That book is now $15 to $18. Now that book's going to cost you $100 retail because I'm still going to get my cut, and so does the retailer. So it seems like this has been proven through people with cameras on the street interviewing people that almost every person in the U.S. doesn't understand that this is how tariffs works. If you slap a bigger tariff on something, yes, some people may switch to a U.S. printer, but that book is still going to be $100 because the U.S. printers cost that much more. So what I find fascinating is that the U.S. thinks it has the world by the balls. They don't understand the fact that they slap tariffs on all these things. Now, there are things that have huge tariffs already. In Canada, for example, we have a 100% tariff on Chinese-made cars, which is the reason why you don't see Chinese cars in North America. Chinese-made electric cars very specifically, because Chinese-made electric cars are very well made with a really good range, and they're really inexpensive. And they know if they import these Chinese-made cars, it'll annihilate the auto industry in North America. So instead of competing, they slap a gigantic tariff, which is the reason why you'll never see it. And you'll see that tariff happen in the States. They'll slap so many big tariffs on Chinese-made electric cars in order to make Elon Musk have the dominant market share. Instead of actually making better cars, they'll just stop better cars from coming in. So we're going to see that more, but it'll be very interesting to see how much blowback is as they start slapping tariffs on all the things people kind of need. And they've been talking about, you know, severing all economic ties with China and all this stuff. There's just something else when people do. There's something called the U.S. There's something called the foreign exchange market, where currency is purchased and traded. And do you know how? So China buys U.S. currency. They do this very specifically to make the exchange rate between U.S. and China at a very specific level to make Chinese manufacturing appealing. Do you know how much money? Do you know how much American currency China owns?
Trillions?
There's $1 trillion. And if the antagonistic relationship gets too bad, and America through Trump tries to strong arm China to the point of economic warfare, then there's little holding China back from simply dumping $1 trillion back into the market and completely destroying the U.S. economy.
That's the thing that kind of worries me, really. I mean, right now, whether we like it or not, nobody can compete economically with China. And that's a problem that we've fallen into, because we have looked into China and not looked into places like India or Africa, where people could be getting their goods from at a very good price, whereas and at the same time, empowering and different economies. But that is going to be a massive thing. What do you make of my? I'm not going to say prediction, but kind of option of companies moving off the United States and settle in Europe or someplace else where the taxation would be a lot kinder?
I guess for a lot of people, like there's certain things that people don't realize that a lot of countries get like one label. Canada is a resource country. America is a service country. India is a service country. China is a manufacturing country. So there are these kind of assumptions that are made. That's the reason why you don't see a lot of telecommunication, like telefirms in China. They're all in India because there was this implication that that's the place. And that's why you don't see game companies printing out of India. It's just, and you think, why don't they? And people, it's a perception of culture. In Europe, the biggest manufacturing sector is, I do believe, in Germany. If you're going to make books or games, you would move out of a manufacturing, either there in Germany or in Poland. I think Poland's also really big as well.
It depends. Poland would be Germany has a couple of big manufacturers, Ludofact being one of them, but Poland is, if not very close, probably already surpassed them. And if you want to print books in the EU or in Europe, then Lithuania is the place to go.
Oh, there you go. But see, I don't know. The problem is that we have such an infrastructure. Like if I want to make bags for my crackers or I want to print books, all I need to do, you go to AliExpress, you put in a query, you'll get 35 companies. We don't have an AliExpress for Europe. We don't have this instant resource where all you need to do is put out a feeler. You don't even have to approach the companies. You can just say, go to AliExpress and go, I want stand-up pouches, and you'll get 15 people reaching out to you. Because they're all clamoring around for their business and they're all competing with each other to give you the lowest and the best rates. We don't have that situation. But once again, it comes down to people say is like, are you going to switch to American printing or American this or European this? I go, sure. But if I do, like, all your products are going to be more expensive. It's not going to magically get cheaper. Like, we're switching to America. Good for you. And now these books are going to cost you $70 instead of 50. Like, why? I go, because we switched over to American printing. Do you not realize how this works? And I go, well, because slave labor. I go, no, it has nothing to do with slave labor. The problem is the American banking system.
And manufacturing
and
system.
I said that if you want to compete with China quite easily, you give a massive grant to a company to create a company with insistence on how they run their company, so everyone gets a fair wage and all that stuff, and you never have to pay that loan back. And then the next thing you know, you can pass that savings on to somebody else. There's nothing. The idea of socialized economics is something that's so alien in America. They'll never do it, and as a result, everything in America costs more because they have to take out a 8% loan for $500,000 to start a business, and then the guy who runs it takes 80% of the money.
I interviewed, I can't remember his name for the life of me. A couple of years ago, I interviewed somebody who made this war game, and he wanted, because of American jobs, he wanted to do the whole thing in the United States, and a game that on the stores would have cost $35 because it was just cardboard. It didn't have any wooden pieces or anything, just cardboard, card tokens. He was selling for $70. And you know what? That the Made in America label did sweet effect to sway people into buying it. Because at the end of the day, people looked at the price. That was it. They didn't give a shit whether it was built and printed in the US or anywhere else. People don't give a shit. People want low prices. That is it. So that's going to be.
That's why Walmart dominates Canada. Like, we try to tell people, hey, come to the farmers market, support local. And they're like, no, we're going to go to Walmart. And the funny thing is that there's been a push now because of rising food costs. Because rising food costs, like the fact that people say grocery costs so much more. I go, yeah, it's funny how the farmers market are not affected by corporate greed.
Isn't it?
So in the last year or two, we've been seeing a situation where farmers market prices have come down to match groceries. But people don't know that. There's the assumption that the farmers market is bespoke. There's a wonderful fellow out of Vancouver that is running farmers markets, but telling the farmers that they can attend for free if they sell their product less than Superstore, which they have, and they make a crap ton of money. And everyone is happy. So this can happen. I'm really hoping this kind of revolution takes place when people realize they can go to these smaller markets and get good produce and good food from local vendors without having to go to Walmart.
Let's hope indeed that's the case. Okay, well, we've been going on about this for nearly half an hour, which I think.
So let's get on to talking about.
Yes, let's go for part 2.